Hi, good day. My name is David Jeffrey and I work for the Makulu Child Development Trust. We're an organization that bridges the gap between academic research on parenting education and the organizations and government departments that support families on a day-to-day basis. One of the programs that we're most excited about is called Dialogic Book Sharing, which I want to tell you more about. This really won't make much sense until you see it in action, so here we go.
Daisy.
Is ek.
Is dit jy?
Ja.
Lyk hy baba nes jy? Nee? Hoekom lyk hy baba nes jy?
Kijk, hier is een mooi bed.
'n Hooibad en waar is nog 'n hooibad?
Zo.
En daar is ook 'n bad en hier is ook nog 'n bad, nee? Nog immers, nee? En wat nog?
Op de deur gezien is mijn mama niet.
En hy skoene.
Huh?
Nou waar is jou skoene? Het jy ook skoene aan?
Kijk,
O, jy het ook skoene aan.
het is kunnen.
Nee, daai het jy ook skoene aan, nee.
Het stekjes.
O, die stekkies. O nee, jy's doodreg die stekkies ja wat jy aan het. Jy sal
I hope what you'll notice from that interaction is how engaging and stimulating it is for the child. Normally, when we talk about reading a book to a child, it's the parent talking for 90% of the time and the child talking for about 10% of the time. But what really stands out here is how the parent and child are taking turns. It's about 50-50 each. The parent is asking questions, engaging the child's interest, talking about what the child wants to talk about, being very affirming, linking what's in the book to the child's own life, and so on. This is a very powerful educational interaction. So why does this work? Simply put, pointing and naming things helps children learn language. Extending and building links between what the child knows and what's in the book enhances child's knowledge. It's an opportunity to talk about intentions, perspectives, and emotions, which helps build social understanding, children's ability to understand other people. And of course, it's an opportunity for closeness between the parent and the child. Maybe most interesting, though, is how it promotes conversational turns, which is just the parent talks, the child talks, and the parent talks again. There have been 2 articles published this year that discuss the importance of conversational turns that I think you should really know about. The first looked at the language environments of children when they were about 2 years old and followed them up again when they were about 10 years. And what they discovered was that it wasn't the number of adult words heard that predicted children's school performance and IQ development. Rather, it was the number of conversational turns between the parent and the child when the child was 2 years old. And this was backed up by a second study which looked at brain imaging and found that the part of the brain associated with language development, Broca's area, was much more stimulated when children were engaged in conversational turns rather than when children were just listening to language. And for those of you familiar with the 30 million word gap, this is a serious contribution, that it's not just the number of words learned that's important, but the exchanges between the parent and the child. And then you can really see with the video we saw earlier how powerful book sharing is as an intervention. There have been 19 randomized control trials on book sharing internationally. And when they're taken on aggregate, you can see that it's roughly a medium effect size on the language that a child can say, expressive language, and the language a child can understand, receptive language. But when we look at the programs that offer parents comparatively more support, which we've called here intensive, the difference is dramatic. This looks much more like a large effect size. And intensive here doesn't mean much more intensive. That's just 60 minutes or more of support provided to parents, primarily through training. And so the lesson to take here is the more support we can provide for parents, the better. And so we developed a program specifically for developing country contexts. Working with Professors Peter Cooper and Lynn Murray, and with the help of Mark Tomlinson's research team and Khayelitsha in South Africa, we developed a program that worked with parents in small groups. They would look through PowerPoint presentations with illustrative video clips. They would get individual support from a community-based facilitator, and each week they would have books to take home and practice with and a reminder take-home card. This was studied in a randomized control trial in 2014 with 91 mother-child pairs of infants between the ages of 14 and 16 months, so quite young, and it was an 8-week book sharing program with a control. And the main outcomes being studied were child language and attention. and these are among the best predictors of school performance and future IQ, so those are really critical. And what we found in the language measure was that children whose parents received the book sharing training learned many times more words than the children whose parents didn't receive the book sharing training. And we had a similar effect for attention. So if you look at this graph, it's just the control group. These are the children whose parents didn't receive the book sharing training, and this is the pre and post assessment. And you can see there's almost no difference. But when we look at the group that did receive the program, the difference is huge. It's an effect size of 1.1, which is just enormous. Critically, these improvements were not associated with family poverty or maternal education. So even families that came from very poor contexts, and even with mothers who had very low levels of formal education, children in those families were still able to enjoy huge developmental benefits. In fact, it was the children who started the program with the lowest developmental outcomes that improved the most. This graph divides children according to their scores at baseline before they started the program between low, medium, and high, and looks at how much they gained from the program by the post-assessment. And so as you can see, it's not a waste of time for the children who started with very high scores. They're still getting a large benefit, but it's the children who started with the lowest scores that are really jumping ahead. And this is very important if we care about educational equity. Often a problem with programs like this is that the children who are better off are best placed to make the most of the program. But here we see the opposite. It's the children who start with the lowest levels that can really gain from it. So 2 messages for you to take home. Dialogic book sharing for families is an extremely powerful program for the language and cognitive development of young children growing up in contexts of poverty. And this impact is especially large for those children that perform the lowest at baseline, irrespective of family poverty or maternal education. The program we developed in South Africa is now being studied internationally. There are 2 studies underway in South Africa, and there are programs in Makgotlong and Lesotho, Baha in India, the United Kingdom, Brazil, and the USA.